What does it mean to be brave? What does that look like to you? Is it a soldier running onto a battlefield? Or is it someone transcending human limitations to do something that was once thought impossible? Or sometimes, is it just getting out of bed the next day after you've lost a loved one? When I agreed to do my first talk today, it didn't occur to me that today would land in between Election Day and Veterans Day. It felt like I'd been thrown into the deep end as some sort of practitioner initiation. So when I first thought about what I would say, I had a different subject in mind. I thought I'd try to find a way to bridge the divisiveness in our country by appealing to the spiritual patriotism that recognizes the service of our veterans as sacred and that none of them stands alone. Maybe I could use the right words to reflect the principles of this philosophy that would remind us that the heart of who we are as a nation is a unified body that is indivisible. But I quickly realized that trying to delve into such subjects would stretch me well beyond the consciousness of a second-year practitioner student, and I might get myself in trouble. Then I thought I'd use a story I had written about my dad's experience as a World War II veteran to serve as a reminder of the sort of courage we often refer to as heroic. The willingness of young men and women to put their human lives on the line for reasons they don't entirely understand speaks to the kind of bravery that most of us will never be expected to muster. Dad's story is a powerful illustration of what so many have sacrificed for the sake of a higher call. I'd be happy to share it with you if you would like to read it on your own, because it comes with a major Kleenex warning. For now, I'll just give you the Cliff Notes version. Soon after he was assigned to the infantry in Germany, my 19-year-old father and a platoon of fellow soldiers were caught in a firefight. In those moments, he had the life-altering experience that countless others have had. He shot and killed a young Nazi soldier at point-blank range. This Eagle Scout, who couldn't imagine what it meant to have an enemy, had just started college with plans to become a doctor. When the need for all able-bodied young men became apparent, he stepped up and declared himself willing to risk his life. But I don't know if he really understood that part of that agreement would mean that he might have to take the life of another human being. As the story goes, he was offered an almost mystical experience of forgiveness, which would completely change the course of his life. When he returned home, he left the dream of becoming a doctor and enrolled instead at Yale Divinity School. His war experience had led him to realize that most physical wounds would heal in time, but such a violation to the soul could last a lifetime. In his application essay to Yale, he wrote, "If I have the opportunity to offer and teach this kind of forgiveness, my life will be worth living." His ministry became an opportunity for him to bring back to life the men he had served with, so they would not be forgotten. I reserved the remainder of my time to tell you about a different kind of courage. If you don't already know, my mom made her transition last week at the age of 90. She was humbled to a fault, so she didn't want to be formally memorialized. She wrote to us that she would rather we honor her memory by just loving each other well. So in defiance of her wish not to be recognized, I am going to share with you some of the amazing story of how my family came to be and the immense bravery my mother displayed in taking on what I will always consider to be one of the greatest feats in human history. After the death of his wife, my dad was left with 5 kids to raise. 2 of us were only toddlers. Dad was completely out of his depth and floundered as he tried to lead a church and manage the never-ending needs of a family like ours. The church stepped up in big ways, but it was clear that more was needed. Our splintering family needed to be brought back together. A phone call from an old seminary buddy in California set in motion one of the greatest love stories of all time. This fellow minister knew about Dad's situation and said, "Ray, there's this wonderful woman in my congregation that I think you should meet." She was a divorcee with 3 daughters. I can only imagine what Dad was thinking in that moment. Are you insane? I already have 5 kids I can't take care of. Why would I add 3 more? Instead, he just took a deep breath and said, "I would like to meet her." Many phone calls and letters were exchanged during the following weeks. Dad shared his war experience with her so she would have a better idea of who he was and what had inspired his ministry. She shared with him how important children were to her. Within a month, Dad flew to California to meet Carol and her girls. And in the next month, she flew to Michigan to meet us. It only took one look at us toddlers for her to say, "Somebody has to take care of those babies." And just like that, it was a done deal. They were engaged to be married 2 months later in California. Generally, weddings in those days involved just a husband and a wife, 2 people, honeymoon. Not this one. The entire wedding party was made up of 7 kids who'd only just met each other. I was the flower girl. The rest were hormonal teenagers who had been thrown together with little warning and no say in the matter. But wait, it gets better. My new mom drove a VW bus. As far as we were concerned, she was a California hippie. As it turned out, that hippie bus was our ride home. 7 kids, 2 adults, a dog, and luggage. We rode for days from sunny California to dreary Michigan in March. This is where one might say, it seemed like a good idea at the time. I was riding shotgun on my new mom's lap. I had just turned 4, so whatever conversation was going on up there in the front seat with me was over my head, literally and figuratively. They must have been hatching a plan for how all of this could possibly work. When we arrived back in Michigan and collected my younger sister who had stayed behind, our parents sat us all down and informed us that they would be a unified front. There would be no playing them off of each other. And so it went. These veritable strangers had partnered up after just 4 months of getting to know one another and agreed to take on the care and rearing of each other's children. In essence, they had agreed to be running mates in an election neither of them expected to be nominated for. But they were committed to seeing it through. They were dedicated to serving their constituency of youngsters in the most diplomatic and democratic way possible. We soon learned that we wouldn't always get what we wanted, but our needs would be supplied. That was their campaign promise to us. Soon after this initial settling in Michigan, Dad got a call from a much larger church opportunity in New York. So we packed up another Mayflower truck and hauled ourselves across the rest of the country. It was there that Mom enrolled in college to finish her bachelor's degree in early childhood education. She was an only child and was learning to manage us on the fly. We were her on-the-job training. It turned out to be a very good thing that she had gone back to school because she was about to become the primary breadwinner. Dad suffered a massive heart attack that left him unable to continue his work as a senior minister and rendered him disabled. He was only 50 years old. We would have to move again. As fate would have it, just a few years earlier, my parents had purchased a small farm in New Hampshire. By living there, we could make up for the lack of cash flow by raising our own livestock and tending a quarter-acre garden throughout the summer that we would harvest in the fall and put up for the rest of the year. For me, the most grueling task, apart from shoveling out the pigsty, was going down to the barn at 5 a.m. to milk the cow, even in winter. We reluctantly drank the raw milk and used the rich Jersey cream to make butter. If the cow happened to step in the bucket, as she sometimes did, we would just use a piece of cheesecloth to strain out the sawdust and use it anyway. Nothing went to waste. Mom was incredibly strong through Dad's recovery. She got a job at the local middle school teaching kindergartners all day. She once commented that in winter, her entire school day consisted of putting on and taking off little snowsuits. When Dad required open heart surgery, she picked us up after school every day, and we would make the hour-long drive to Hanover to visit him. We didn't mind because it meant we were going to get McDonald's for dinner. It was also during this time that Mom decided to pursue a master's degree so she could make more money to take care of us. In the following years, 11 grandchildren were born, and more recently, almost 7 great-grandchildren. In her spare time, Mom knitted gorgeous sweaters for each of them, which she had already done for all of us over the years. Night after night, she and Dad would be in the same room as her needles clicked away. Suddenly, she would stop, and then violently start ripping out huge swaths of yarn in order to go back and pick up the one stitch she had dropped. She didn't seem bothered, but Dad would always clutch his chest and feign a heart attack. I can't believe that she didn't stab him with a knitting needle for doing that, but that was not her nature. As if all of this had not been a big enough challenge, Dad died 2 months before Mom retired from teaching. On the one hand, this could have been seen as a cruel twist of fate. But in the same way she had always done, Mom soldiered on. She had finally been set free of nearly 25 years of taking care of her husband and family. It was her time to go out and explore. She rode a bike down the length of the Danube River in Europe. She went out west and taught Zuni Indian children on a reservation. She hiked treacherous miles to participate in archaeological digs. Finally, she built a house overlooking the ocean in Maine, and at age 65, she took up watercolor painting and became a well-known local artist whose works can still be seen in many public places in Maine. This amazing woman, who had longed for adventure, traveling with her girls in their hippie bus, ended up picking up a few extra passengers along the way, and took an exit off the highway of her life that would take her on a journey that even her creative imagination could not have conjured up. Mom didn't align herself with any particular religious idea. I would describe her as kind of a Quaker-style Buddhist, if there is such a thing. She knew the importance of staying centered while chaos spun around her. She made sure to take time for herself by working in her flower gardens. Since I began studying this philosophy, I realized that she had always modeled the principles of its teachings, whether she knew it or not. She was drawn to science and watched PBS documentaries endlessly, even when we would remind her that there are other channels. She loved to know how things worked. In Science of Mind, we have a similar curiosity, which applies to the ways in which the thoughts behind our actions tend to influence the nature of the effects we experience. Mom understood the importance of disciplining her own mind to always be heading in a positive direction, because negativity was simply not an option for her. Her values reflected a deep belief in what we refer to here as qualities of God: abundance, harmony, joy, and peace, to name a few. She was deeply committed to being an example of what is possible, and she knew the value of not holding on to pain. She chose happiness. These last few months of my mother's life were spent in quiet reflection. She was taking stock of how she had shown up in this lifetime. Had she done enough? Had she made up for mistakes? Did she need to repair any places in her relationships with us before moving on? One by one, each of us showed up to offer her gratitude and tell her how she had changed our lives for the better. She had saved us from what might have been a very different outcome. She was evidence to me that faith need not be just a religious idea, but an energetic one. I remember her saying, "All chaos can't help but return to order. It's the law of nature." Most of us will never have worn the uniform of our country as veterans. But the truth of oneness is that we are all veterans of our own experiences. There is not one of us who has not been affected by someone else's life, whether we knew them or not. The nature of the universe brings all experiences to us in one form or another, and we get to decide whether to thrive or merely survive. We can't always control the experiences themselves, but we can choose whether or not we want to heal from them in order to reveal the deeper truth contained within. I will close by posing some questions to all of you. Knowing that each of our lives contains vastly different experiences, how will you cast your vote for how you want your life to look, regardless of the circumstances and conditions that have led you to this point? Can you forgive someone whose choices led them to inflict their soul wounds on you? Or will you continue to vote against your own best interests by carrying energetic residue that is not yours to hold? Would you be able to recognize the places in yourself that need to be forgiven? Have there been well-intended acts of bravery in your experience that have resulted in someone needing to forgive or be forgiven? Could you let go for the sake of your own peace? And the biggest question, do you have the courage to forgive yourself for the choices you made when you didn't know any better, by recognizing that life unfolds in ways we can't predict, and the only possibility in any moment is to do the best we can? Let me leave you with some thoughts from Ernest Holmes in his prayer for peace. I know that there is but one mind, which is the mind of God, in which all people live and move and have their being. I know there is a divine pattern for humanity, and within this pattern there is infinite harmony and peace, cooperation, unity, and mutual helpfulness. I know that the mind of each person, being one with the mind of God, shall discover the method, the way, and the means best fitted to permit the flow of divine love between individuals. I know that the mind of each person, being one with the mind of God, shall discover the method, the way, and the means best fitted to permit the flow of divine love between individuals. I know that the mind of each person, being one with the mind of God, shall discover the method, the way, and the means best fitted to permit the flow of divine love between individuals. I know there's a free interchange of ideas, of cultures, of spiritual concepts, of ethics, of educational systems and scientific discoveries. For all good belongs to all alike. I know that because the divine mind has created us all, we are bound together in one infinite and perfect unity. In bringing about peace, I know that all people will remain individual but unified for the common purpose of promoting peace, happiness, harmony, and prosperity. I know that deep within every person is the divine pattern of perfect peace already implanted. I now declare that in each person and in leaders of thought everywhere, this divine pattern moves into action and form to the end that all people shall live together in peace, harmony, and prosperity forever. So it is now.